I want to talk a little bit about alcohol. So I first want you to imagine that I'm bringing a new drug onto the market. And this new drug, I'm going to try and get it cleared by governments worldwide for civilian use. It's a recreational substance and it's in pill format. And this pill I'm bringing out, it's going to make people feel good maybe for about an hour. But it does have some side effects, and the side effects are it's going to make people possibly be violent to each other. They're not going to care whilst they're being violent. It's going to increase domestic violence substantially. It's going to make people get fatter. It's going to make people make incredibly poor choices while they're out and under the influence of this tablet. They're going to be unable to drive properly, and they're going to be very tempted while they're under the influence of this tablet to drive faster than they normally would, and it's going to slow their reaction times down massively. So they're being overconfident and they don't have the ability to use their skills to drive properly. So road traffic accidents are going to massively increase when everyone takes this pill. People are going to have sex with people they wouldn't normally have sex with, and they're not going to think about any of the consequences. They're certainly not going to be concerned about using any sort of protection or concerned about disease or unwanted pregnancy or anything like that. And they're going to make terrible food choices whilst they're under the influence of this pill. Even if they're on a diet, no matter what, they're just going to go and stuff their faces with as much junk food as they possibly can. When they get home, they might die. If they have taken maybe a couple more pills than they should have done, they might just die in their sleep. And over time, even if they take the right amount of this pill I'm releasing, they're going to die from it anyway, because it's going to slowly mess up their liver, and it's going to cause all kinds of problems, including damage to the cells in the brain. And it's going to damage their nervous systems as well. But that's going to take quite a while, and they probably won't notice it happening. And because it's kind of fun to take the pill, you know, it's no big deal, right? So obviously you would have zero chance of getting that kind of drug ever cleared by any government in any country in the world now. You know, that is just crazy when you think about it, you know, that those are the realities of alcohol. And there's no way on the planet that you would ever get alcohol through the doors these days. You know, no one would sign that off. So we have to think about our relationship with alcohol. You know, when I think of my own, I've got a couple of very clear periods in my life. I've had two periods where I didn't drink at all, and I've had a couple of periods in my life where I did drink. And you know, I don't do things by half. So when I did drink, if I was going out for a drink, I didn't mess around and have like one drink and go home like a good English guy should. You know, I had several drinks, and that was fun at the time. You know, I can remember having some good times with alcohol, but with hindsight I also remember back and wonder if I could have had just as much fun without it. Now, the issues came with alcohol for me was the calories that it contains, because alcohol is incredibly high in calories, and I started to get very fat. That also made it virtually impossible when I was drinking alcohol at the weekends to make sensible food choices. So even if I was choosing to be good with my diet for the rest of the week, as soon as I went out on a Friday night and had 2 or 3 drinks, that was it. You know, off to the pizza shop, burgers, chips, and all that stuff as well. And then the next day, of course, I felt absolutely awful. And funny enough, that got worse as I got older. You know, that the older I got, the worse my hangovers became. And I used to kid myself about it, but the deal was, you know, the next day was pretty much a write-off. And for me, that's terrible, because I love doing things. I really enjoy life, and I certainly don't want to write off, you know, a day out of my weekend if I've been working all week. And then the next day, what do we do when we feel hungover and we feel sorry for ourselves? Well, of course, we treat ourselves to some junk food and but go and buy a burger and chips, or go and buy some sort of big dessert, and we hope that makes us feel better, which in the short term it probably does. But the issue with that is alcohol spikes our insulin levels. I've mentioned this before, so that when we're consuming fats and stuff like that, they all end up in fat storage. The other thing people might not realize with alcohol is the body is so busy processing the alcohol that actually you can end up malnourished if you drink often. Regular heavy drinkers don't really get nourishment from the food they're eating, because the body is so desperate to rid itself of the poison that is the alcohol, that it's not actually drawing any decent nutrition out of the foods you're eating. And that leads me on to the point that alcohol is simply a poison. The reason we feel drunk from it is a side effect of being poisoned. It's not, alcohol isn't working magic. It's poisoning us, and one of the effects of that poison is the things that we associate with being drunk: slurring your speech, your lack of inhibition, and all that kind of thing. And imagine that with anything else. I mean, if it was like, if a snake bite did that to you, people wouldn't be going out and getting bit by a snake and then walking around slurring and falling on the floor and imagining that was a really good time. So it seems so strange that as a society we've just developed this acceptance that drinking something that is basically a poison is great fun. And one of the issues I actually had with not drinking alcohol I didn't find it that difficult to give up. I just gave it up. It wasn't a big deal to me. And I realised for some people it's going to be a massive deal, because the other downside is alcohol's highly addictive. But one of the big problems was the society around me didn't want me to give it up, and I still have that to this day, that if I go out somewhere, especially if I'm with a group of guys, especially if those guys are kind of trying to be, manly men and stuff, it actually sort of perturbs people, and they get upset if I don't want to drink. And it's amazing, even though I'm a 47-year-old man, I've got these other guys saying, come on, have a drink, have a drink, have a drink. I'm like, guys, I don't want to drink. I'm happy to stand here and have a fun time. I don't need to drink. I'll have a Pepsi Max or Diet Coke or something. No big deal to me. But it seems to almost affect their ability to have an enjoyable time if one of the party isn't drinking. So as a society, we probably need to really think about that if people are making decisions not to drink, that might be because they're an alcoholic. It might be because they've got some real issues with drinking. It might be because they were brought up by parents who beat them from one side of the house to the other whilst they were drunk, and that person doesn't ever want to associate with alcohol again. So maybe think a little bit before you give people a hard time for not drinking. There's all kinds of reasons why people won't. My reason's probably one of the less concerning, just the fact that I don't want to drink, I don't want the calories from it, and I don't want the ill effects. The other reason I gave up was because my health was suffering, and that's the reason I started these fitness blogs in the first place, that my health I had unusual skin conditions occurring. I had the kind of symptoms you would associate with being diabetic. So I was having tests for diabetes. I had stomach issues that wouldn't go away, that in the end I got tested for. I was concerned about bowel cancer and things like that. I had those kind of symptoms, and some or all of those may have been, at least in part, down to the fact that beer really doesn't seem to agree with me. The only beer I've had in a year, I had 4 cans of beer on Christmas Day, just because I thought, hey, it's Christmas, I'll treat myself and have these 4 cans. They were only small craft IPA cans, and oh my God, it made me so ill, made my stomach really bad. And thinking back, now I see that as it made me ill because I don't drink anymore. So I was able to sort of look at it from an unbiased viewpoint. But back when I was, drinking at the weekends and stuff, I would have just put that down to, oh, my stomach's bad again. And I kind of didn't want to recognise that it may have been caused by the alcohol. And I was I was by no means a alcoholic. You know, I could take it or leave it. But at the same time, a lot of the time I was taking it, and you know, it's a pernicious substance, because you believe that you are making your own decisions, but to a degree, you know, you're heavily influenced by the substance itself. And there were probably times when I thought, you know, I've got these health issues, I should just not drink alcohol. And why did I not make that choice earlier? You know, why did I carry on down that road until I felt really rubbish, and then in the end gave everything up? This was all massively exasperated, I think, by the COVID pandemic, which for most of us, you know, we went into lockdown. At first, COVID was a really frightening thing. You know, it seemed like the governments were behaving as if this was like a apocalyptic situation, you know, and no one really knew what it was all about. But it was the first time I've ever known civilians to be sort of ordered to stay in their houses and not come out. So the only thing I could think at the time was, wow, this is really serious, you know, our lives are in danger, because I couldn't understand why else the government would make those kind of orders. It was like out of a dystopian film. So there was nothing to do. We were all stuck in houses. The future was looking kind of concerning, because, you know, if that kind of stuff's happening, you have to question the stability of life itself. And then, of course, what's an easy option? Well, what would make you feel better in the short term is having a good old drink and thinking, nah, who cares about the apocalypse, you know? And alcohol's certainly the thing for that. If you've got imminent death coming your way, then having a drink is probably one of its only virtues, that it literally makes you not care about anything. So I think a lot of people fell into that category during lockdown. And we know from data and statistics, if you look at the epidemiology coming out the other side of things, you know, alcohol consumption went up dramatically in every country that had lockdowns. And the you know, health risks and problems associated with alcohol consumption, heavy alcohol consumption, are starting to escalate now, because of course it takes a little time for those things to come into effect. And we're certainly seeing we saw a level up in domestic violence, which is intrinsically related to alcohol. You know, a high percentage of those cases have alcohol involved. And we saw an escalation in violence in general around family homes. There was even an escalation in murders within family homes, and that wasn't something that particularly made the news, but you can bet your bottom dollar that alcohol was involved in that as well. I spent 23 years in the security industry dealing with violence, and probably 99% of the violence I dealt with was committed by people that were absolutely out of their heads on alcohol. And most of those people were not bad people. They weren't violent people. They were just behaving in a completely different way than they would normally because of alcohol. And some of them I felt pretty sorry for, because they would have ended up going to prison and serving time and possibly ruining the rest of their lives, because they'd had one too many drinks and then they'd started behaving in a manner that they never would usually. So that's why I don't drink alcohol anymore. I probably never will again. I can't see any reason why I would want to. It's a shame, because I really used to enjoy a craft beer, but I just cannot be bothered. It costs me money, it makes me feel ill, and the downsides to it, as I've just mentioned, are horrendous. Right, if you've got anything to say on alcohol, leave it in the comments. It's a polarizing subject. You know, some people will defend it like zealots. Some people will say, hey, yeah, I like a drink, but I know it's pretty bad for me as well. I'll leave a link to a guy you may have heard of, Andrew Huberman, who is got a whole plethora of videos on various different subjects about human health, the body, and all kinds of interesting stuff. But he does a really good long episode on alcohol, and that will actually detail all the things that alcohol's doing to your body, and it will eradicate any myth that you may have that alcohol is somehow doing you a benefit. There is literally no benefit to alcohol. All you could say is drinking a very small amount is better than drinking a mediocre amount, and drinking a mediocre amount is better than drinking a really heavy duty large amount. But drinking nothing at all is better than all those three. And even drinking small amounts increase our risk from very serious illness by a shocking and staggering amount. So I would really urge you to watch that Huberman podcast. It is absolutely fascinating, and it would probably be enough to put any sensible person off for life. Take care, have a great weekend, try not to drink too much.